What's up everyone? I'm Tim and this is my channel 40 Times Around, where we talk about everything related to motorcycles, camping, travel, and adventure. Today we're going to talk about some tips and things to be aware of if you're riding in extremely high heat, which is something I do a lot of living in Arizona. So stick around. Okay, so we're going to talk about riding in extreme heat today, and we're going to break this down into 4 categories. We're going to talk about danger signs to look for and risks involved, why sweat is your friend, then we'll go over some general tips to keep your body cool, and finally we'll cover some other things you should be aware of related to your motorcycle and the road in general. So riding in extreme heat can be one of the more dangerous situations to ride in because heat can really affect your clarity of mind and your ability to think clearly. And I'm talking really high heat here, 110, 115. I've even ridden in as high as 120 degrees. And for you guys outside of the US, that's 49 Celsius. So before we go over the risks, I think it is so important to recognize when you're in trouble and act accordingly. And more importantly, you should not let it get to this point. But these are some of the signs that you might already be in trouble. Cramps, for one. Muscle cramps will typically start in the legs and stomach first, and this is a good first clue that it's time to pull over. Cramps are your body's way of telling you it is low on electrolytes, which we'll get into in a minute. You may also notice things like headaches, dizziness, confusion, delirium, and you may even notice some slurred speech or nausea and potentially vomiting. You'll probably notice tiredness, rapid breathing, and increased heart rate. And you'll probably have flushed skin, which is another good indicator that someone is overheating. And related to motorcycling, the most immediately dangerous symptom is fainting, which obviously is really bad on a motorcycle. So don't ignore these signs. If you notice these, you are already at risk of things like heat exhaustion or heat stroke. So heat exhaustion is the early stage of a heat stroke, and heat stroke is incredibly dangerous. It can do lasting damage to vital organs like your kidneys, muscles, and heart. It can actually even cause brain damage. If it's untreated, this becomes life-threatening, so this is no joke. So if you notice these signs and you try to be a tough guy and just ignore them, heat exhaustion will eventually cause your body's thermostat to fail. Your body temperature will just rise and rise, the heart beats faster and faster, and you will eventually pass out. The dangerous part here is that you may lose the mental capability of recognizing these signs, so you may not know you are in trouble when it gets to this point. That is why it is so important to learn to recognize the earliest symptoms, act accordingly, and ideally avoid letting it get to the point of any symptoms showing up anyways. And we'll get to that soon, but first let's talk about sweat. So let's just get into a little bit of science here because it will become important during the next category of this video, so bear with me here. Basically, your body has a built-in cooling system that works like this. You sweat, that sweat will evaporate, meaning liquid turning to gas or air. And as this happens, the vapor or your sweat will pull heat away with it as it leaves your body. Less heat means you feel cooler and your body will maintain a temperature that you can survive at. It's a pretty great system when conditions allow it to work properly. So this is the evaporation side of things, but there's another aspect to note, and that is what is called convection. This principle basically means heat transfers from a hot object to a cold one. More specifically, this means that energy or heat will transfer via moving air from higher temperatures to lower temperatures. So on a motorcycle in normal warm to high temperatures, this is great news. This is where vented gear will work really well. The vents in summer jackets will move air around your body, and because the air in this scenario is cooler than your body temperature, it will pull hot air away from you and replace it with cooler air, like a built-in air conditioner. And this is, of course, as long as you're actually moving and not sitting in traffic. To visualize this, imagine holding an ice cube. It will feel cold because the ice cube is absorbing heat from your hand. The higher temperature will go to the lower temperature. Even if it's 95 degrees, as long as it's lower than your body temperature, this principle will work. Problem is, when it gets to temperatures that are higher than body temperatures, so we're talking above 98 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 Celsius, will have a reverse effect. That means it will transfer the other way. Hot air surrounding your skin will actually transfer into your body, making your core temperature rise. This is why vented gear won't work in extreme high heat and will actually make things worse for you. This will be important in the next category, which brings us to tips for keeping cool when riding in the heat. So because of convection, which we just talked about, the best approach in triple-digit temps is evaporative cooling. So the first tip is to wear a normal riding jacket, not a summer jacket covered in mesh panels. And I realize this seems backwards to wear more clothes when it's hot, but you want to be able to adjust the amount of air moving across your skin, and this will come from moderate vents, not huge mesh panels. Too much wind will overheat you because it will dry up all your sweat before it has a chance to do its job. Another thing I do is wear moisture wicking shirts or a sports shirt. And when temps are really high, I'll actually wet the shirt and then put my jacket on over it. The jacket will keep the shirt from drying out too fast and will also protect me from the sun. Obviously, wearing just a t-shirt in super high heat, or at any point on a motorcycle for that matter, is just a bad idea. But the moisture wicking material will pull moisture or sweat away from your body, and then it will be evaporated through the shirt, which will pull heat from your body with it. Like we talked about before, this is the evaporation process. The important thing for this process is airflow, but again in limited amounts. Wetting the shirt will aid in the cooling process and will actually prevent your body from needing to sweat so much. You can actually wear an evaporative cooling neck wrap or bandana, which works well too. However, this won't last too long because when the wind hits it, it'll dry out pretty quickly. I've been known to dump some water in my helmet too. And speaking of helmets, the same principle applies to your helmet. You'll be better off closing the visor on your full face helmet and just opening up the vents to moderate the airflow. If your helmet doesn't have great ventilation, then cracking the visor is a better option to leaving it wide open. As far as your gloves, you should be wearing ventilated gloves, and pants and shoes and boots and all of that should all be breathable materials. The next tip is to plan your route accordingly. Here in Phoenix, we try to get out of the valley to higher altitudes where the temps are much cooler. Another part of planning your route though is planning the timing of your route. We leave really early in the morning before it gets hot, and we get out of the heat and get to the mountains. Then we get back to the valley late at night after the hottest part of the day. Something else you should consider is planning activities into your day to cool down. You can see in a lot of my videos, I plan rides to places with water so I can jump in and cool down throughout the day. Now this isn't always an option, but you could opt for a long lunch in an air-conditioned restaurant. Just make sure to eat light because that food will just sit in your stomach and it will aid in the dehydration process, and the food can actually spoil and make you sick. Make sure to take more frequent breaks than you typically would. You want to always be stopping to cool down, rest, rehydrate, and replenish your electrolytes, which brings us to the next tip, staying hydrated. But let's break that down a little bit because this is such a huge part of riding in the heat. In fact, this is arguably the biggest part of riding in the heat safely. So for starters, only water is water. Coffee and soda are diuretics, meaning they will just make you pee and therefore dehydrate you further. Sports drinks carry valuable electrolytes but are high in sugar, which basically cancel out the electrolytes. So when I say staying hydrated, I am specifically referring to drinking water. Okay, let's talk about a few tips to make sure you are staying hydrated. And for one, wearing a Camelback will help immensely. What I'll do if I'm leaving from home in the morning or if I'm sleeping somewhere that has access to a freezer is I will fill the Camelback about 3/4 of the way and then freeze it overnight. Then during the next day, I just keep adding water to the ice and it keeps it cool between stops. When the ice melts, you can always refill it at the next gas station. Just remember, it's better to be constantly sipping water than it is to just chug water every time you stop. So wearing a Camelback or having some type of bladder device to drink from will be a huge help. Also make sure that you always have water with you, like a few bottles in your cases or saddlebags. This way, if you ever get stuck for any reason, you always have a reserve just in case. To make sure that you're staying hydrated, you want to make sure, number one, that you're actually peeing, and number two, that your pee is clear. If you're peeing a dark color, it's a bad sign and you need to drink more water. Recognizing the signs of dehydration are important, and this is one of them. Okay, so now let's cover a few of the other hazards you should watch out for with your bike in the road. Probably one of the biggest and most obvious hazards on the road during a hot day is tar snakes. Tar snakes are what road crews use to seal broken cracks and prevent water from getting under the road and causing further damage. They get really soft in the heat and will actually move as you pass over them. They also get super slippery when they're wet, but that's for another video. The point here is that they can be very hazardous for motorcyclists. So to deal with these, try to cross them at an upright position if you can. Although if you have to cross them while leaning through the corner, be prepared for the bike to move a little and just make sure to relax, not tense up or overcorrect if the back end starts to wiggle. Also, a high heat day likely means the sun will be glaring and intense, so make sure you have good sunglasses, preferably polarized. And also, any skin that is exposed should get plenty of sunscreen, although you should really keep all your skin covered as much as possible. Another tip is to carry a footprint for your side stand. The heat will soften the pavement, and if you park your bike for a while, the weight of the bike can actually sink the side stand into the pavement. I actually have a larger footprint installed on my side stand, so I don't have to carry one. And this comes in handy off-road too if I park in sand or any softer surface, but definitely carry a footprint with you if it's hot. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a piece of plastic about this big, and you just place it under the side stand, which will distribute the weight of the bike and spread it out a little more, preventing the bike from getting up close and personal with the pavement. Now a few tips about your motorcycle specifically and some things you should watch out for. Tire pressure for one needs to be at the appropriate pressure pressure, and tires should be in good condition as they are at high risk when it's super hot out. Also, you should check a few things if you're doing a prolonged high heat ride. These would be things like brake hoses, fluid levels, and things like that. As far as fluid levels, if you have a liquid cooled bike, then definitely keep an eye on coolant. And that's about it. Those are some tips on riding in high heat conditions. Hopefully you guys got something out of this video. If you did, make sure you hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you guys want to see more videos about motorcycles, camping, travel, and adventure. And don't forget to hit that little bell, that way you guys don't miss anything whenever I post something new. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.